Hmm.
Nothing beats it. New enamel active shield shields the enamel to defend against erosion and cavities. I think that this product is a game changer for my patients. It really works. Small business days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business.
Oh, shoot. I don't know that this is going to work. No, I know it's not, but she'd be on because she's running it. Presenters, you don't go on at the last minute.
That's a long box.
Oh, here's Clara. Hi, Clara. I was just calling you because I didn't know if you had started it already. I wanted to make sure. I thought I would come after you, but you hadn't come on yet. Is that right?
I hadn't. So.
Oh, good. We're okay. I just sometimes this Zoom does weird things, so I just
no. Good to check about that. How are you?
Well, I'm okay here.
Yeah, lots.
So Marlene is going to be on too, but she's listening to the news for a few more minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Oh my, I bet you're exhausted.
I'm not exhausted, but there are a number of things going on. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I hear ya.
Mm-hmm. So Clara, I can let participants in. Let me make you as a co-host.
Okay, great.
To make sure that's going to work. Okay. And I don't know why this said it's recording
time out of your evening. We are a little bit of a small gathering. I think we know is every measurement of CO2 matters. So does every voice that we can uplift in our advocacy for our planet. So really appreciate all you taking the time and commitment to learn about these standards. So I'll turn it over to our presenters in just a minute, but I thought I'd just give a little bit of a run through of how we're going to structure our time. So we'll begin with a presentation from Lilliana Castillo, and she's going to give us an overview of the standards and also maybe some insights into the big picture comm strategy, which she's excellent at. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Warner Anderson, who is with, I can never remember your acronym, but New Mexico Health Professionals for Climate Action. And he's going to uplift some of our public health concerns, as well as I think the positive opportunities that attend these standards. And then I and Joan will probably jump in too to say just a few words about sort of grounding our comments in the different faith and ethical and spiritual traditions that we hold. So that will be the first half of our time, and then we'll hold time for question and answer. So if you have questions, if you feel like you need to write them down, you can put them in the chat, but go ahead and hold those until after our presentations. So I think I will go ahead and kick it off to Lilliana, and I'd love if both of you just gave a little bit of a more robust introduction of who you are and your work. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Claire. Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. It's so good to be here with all of you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't, so it's very good to meet you. My name is Lilliana Castillo. I am the Director of Communications with Single Space Strategies, which is an Albuquerque-based consulting firm. As part of that work, I have the great pleasure of supporting the New Mexico Clean Air Coalition, which is about 30 organizations who are supporting the advanced clean cars and truck standards that we're here to talk about tonight. Broadly speaking, I am a communications professional who's been working in advocacy for about 12 years. Former journalist, could say still recovering journalist. What really keeps me in this work and keeps me happy and passionate about this work is helping people tell their stories. And I love what Clara said about like every pound of CO2 we can take out of the atmosphere is just as important as every voice we can uplift. I love that. And I think, you know, one of the things that I'm just super, like I mentioned, super passionate about is storytelling. Storytelling is something that connects us to each other as humans, is something that can get us past, you know, the division and divisiveness that is just so pervasive in our world today. And so I've been focusing on in the New Mexico Clean Air campaign of trying to uplift stories of folks who have an EV, love their EV, and can help share that story with the world. And we have a couple of folks here with us today who've recently helped me do that. One of them is Anne McCartney, and Ward helped with that as well. And so what are the advanced clean cars and truck standards? These are statewide rules that the Environmental Improvement Board and the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board will be considering at their hearings in November. These standards, and I will do the simple explanation, and if you have technical questions, let me know. These standards, generally speaking, increase the numbers and percentages, the amounts of electric vehicles that manufacturers need to deliver to New Mexico over the course of 12 years. And that includes, you know, the vehicles we all drive to work every day, but that also includes heavy duty trucks that transport our goods to us from all over the country. And that's the truck part of the equation. These standards actually build on standards that the Environmental Improvement Board and the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Air Quality Board adopted back in May 2022. So they have already adopted what is called the Advanced Clean Cars 1 standards. And now we are advocating for them to pass the Advanced Clean Cars 2 and the Clean Truck standards. And this is important for many reasons. The first being that New Mexicans deserve clean air in the communities that they live in. And we definitely have a vehicle tailpipe pollution problem in New Mexico. Tailpipe pollution harms health. It causes climate change. And it also puts families in situations where they have to deal with really volatile gas prices. And so we definitely see bringing more clean electric vehicles to New Mexico as an important solution for many issues that New Mexican families are facing. Okay, let me see. Sorry, looking through my notes. The transportation pollution is actually the second largest source of climate pollution in New Mexico, second only to oil and gas production, which I'm sure wouldn't surprise any of you here. Again, it's harming our air, our environment overall, and our climate. The clean truck rules specifically are really important to be reducing air pollution along major trucking routes. And we have several of those in New Mexico, particularly I-25 and I-40. And so communities that live along those highways who tend to be lower income, people of color, children or elders who are more susceptible to respiratory conditions like asthma, are really disproportionately impacted by this pollution. And so we see it as a really important equity and accountability issue with truck manufacturers to really insist that they do a better job at protecting the health of those who live along those transportation routes. Excuse me. Transportation related pollutants are linked to many adverse health effects, including decreased lung function, inflammation of airways, aggravated asthma, increased risk of cancer, damage to the immune system, and neurological, reproductive, developmental, and other health problems. And so the health aspect of this can't be understated. And we, as the coalition who is advocating for this work, we're a coalition of environmental, climate, environmental justice organizations, faith groups like NMIPL, as well as business and other leaders in the state. I think I already mentioned, so the EIB, which is the Environmental Improvement Board, and the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board, my goodness, that's a mouthful, will be having joint hearings in the middle of November, November 13 through 15, on these standards. And that, I believe, is what we're here to do tonight, is help prepare you to provide public comment at those hearings. I think, again, one of the most important things that I recommend to anyone who wants to speak up, whether that's in a written form like an LTE or a guest column, or if you're going to give verbal public comment, our leaders really do want to hear from people, like they want to know that folks support standards like this. And so if you have an EV, or you want an EV, or you struggle with a respiratory issue, I think sharing a personal story about how these rules impact you is one of the most powerful things any of us can do. And so that's what I encourage people to do. And then Clara, I have talking points that I'm happy to share, but we can do that at the end if you'd like.
Sure, yeah, let's hold it there. Thank you so much, Lilliana. And go on to Dr. Anderson. And do you want me to pull up your slides?
If you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen. Hold on one second. Not coming up on my thing, even though I have them up. Let's try. All right, do you all see those?
No, we see your email.
You just see my email? Oh gosh, that's scary.
Read it.
Okay, let me see. We'll stop share and try to pull it up on, I have it right now downloaded. Maybe it would prefer them to be this. Okay, let's try this again. How about that? Awesome.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, well, my name is Warner Anderson. I'm a boarded internal medicine specialist. I've done emergency medicine most of my clinical career, and my clinical career kind of ended on 9/11 when I got mobilized to the global war on terror. And as a result of that, I became interested in and a practitioner of global health. So that's what I do now. Could you give me the next slide, please?
Trying. Oh, is that the next slide?
Okay.
Okay, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, just a second. Okay. I wanted to talk first about the global health burden of climate warming. And this will be really quick, this slide, but I wanted to start out with Albuquerque. Climate warming has resulted in the potential spread of tropical diseases into formerly temperate climates as far north as Albuquerque. So you can think of temperate climates as four season and tropical climates as rainy and dry season. The Albuquerque Environmental Health Department has recently documented the rapid spread of Aedes aegypti, yellow fever mosquito, in several Albuquerque neighborhoods. There's been no tropical disease transmission yet in Albuquerque, but this species of mosquito spreads diseases like Zika, dengue, and chikungunya. Chikungunya is sort of like hantavirus. It's one of those hemorrhagic viruses that you don't want to get. Forced migrations, I heard the border mentioned a couple minutes ago. Droughts were likely a key driver of large increases in family migration from Honduras and Guatemala to the United States from 2018 actually onward. Many of those arriving in the United States during this time came from rural areas, including the highlands of Guatemala, where the indigenous communities make up a large proportion of the population. They left their farms because they could no longer feed their families if they remained there. And the reason they couldn't feed their families is because of their paradoxical occurrence of storms and drought, both fueled by climate warming. Let's go to the other side of the globe. Heat injury and deaths in 2022. The French Public Health Agency recorded an excess of 2,816 deaths compared to the previous 5 years, directly related to 3 heat waves in France in the summer of 2022. You may remember that in the news. The people who died were the vulnerable, who are the elderly, the very young, and those who have chronic illnesses. Forest fires and wildland fires, I don't think I need to say too much about. The norteños in northern New Mexico can tell you everything you need to know about it. But forest fires are human caused, and they're also caused by nature. The smoke inhalation includes many of the same pollutants that we're going to be talking about regarding traffic-related air pollution. Next slide, please. So what is air pollution? We should define it before we talk about it. It's a witch's brew of hazardous substances from both human-made and natural sources. So human include vehicle emissions, fuel oils, natural gas to heat homes, all those kinds of things, particularly coal-fueled power plants. We used to have a terrible problem when the Four Corners plant was open in Farmington. The pollution came all the way down to Gallup and caused haze and coughing, and it was pretty miserable. Natural sources include hazardous substances released into the air by nature, smoke from wildfires, ash and gases from volcanoes, methane, which the source that I took this from said methane is emitted from decomposing organic matter in soils, but it also bubbles up from the sea bottom. Obviously, it plumes from our oil wells in northeastern and southeastern and northwestern New Mexico and elsewhere. And an interesting sort of intellectual puzzle of is this natural or is this human caused is in agribusiness, where the cattle belch and pass flatus that has high amounts of methane in it. So the meat industry causes a great amount of methane emissions, a surprising amount. Next slide, please. To get to the point, traffic-related air pollution is a mixture of gases and particles, generally primarily from internal combustion engines. Polluting fuels include gasoline, methanol, diesel, biodiesel, jet fuel, kerosene, others. These fuels produce ground level ozone, various forms of carbon, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, volatile organic compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and my favorite is fine particulate matter. Next slide, please. I'm clicking my mouse and wondering why it's not working. Okay. I wanted to talk about ozone first. It's an atmospheric gas. It occurs in nature, but at ground level, it's called smog. When it's mixed with a couple other ingredients. It's created when pollutants are emitted by cars, power plants, other industrial sources. When those exhausts chemically react in the presence of sunlight. Ozone is a powerful oxidant, and I put that in bold letters and italics because we talk a lot about antioxidants being good for you. So I'll let your intuition do the work on how good oxidants are for you. It's far much more of an oxidant than the normal species of O2 in the air. This high oxidizing potential causes ozone damage to mucus and respiratory tissues in animals, causes eyes to burn. Some people can smell it in surprisingly small amounts. I believe the threshold for some people is 0.01 parts per million, so 1/10 of what you see there. So they can smell it before it's causing problems. The American Lung Association estimates that, this surprised me. I pulled this from their website. Nearly 50% of Americans live in counties that are not in compliance with ozone regulations. That's just astounding that 50% of Americans are being subjected to excessive levels of ozone. I wanted to point out that while ozone is a potent respiratory hazard and pollutant near ground level, the ozone layer up above is good for us, and it prevents ultraviolet light from reaching the Earth's surface and causing premature aging of the skin, basal cell carcinomas, and melanomas, squamous cell carcinomas, all that wrinkling and stuff that I'm dealing with now at 76. Thank you. Noxious gases include carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides. They're components of motor vehicle emissions and byproducts of industrial processes. NOx is shorthand for nitric oxide and nitrogen oxide in like a mixture of it. These gases contribute to the formation of smog and acid rain, as well as affecting, I mean degrading tropospheric ozone. So the good ozone we just talked about. NOx gases are produced by the reaction between nitrogen and oxygen during the combustion of fuels, like in car engines. In areas of high motor vehicle traffic, such as in large cities, the nitrogen oxides emitted can be a significant source of air pollution. So this is a health equity issue if anybody's interested in health equity. But what this means is that if you live within 500 yards of an interstate, or if you're in an industrial area, those folks who live in those areas are going to have much higher incidence of respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses and many other illnesses than other people. By the way, NOx gases are produced naturally by lightning, and that's part of nitrogen fixation, which is good for our soil. So I pointed out the yin and the yang, I think, about 3 times here. So there you are. Can I see the next one, please? It's estimated that transportation fuels are responsible for 54% of the human-caused NOx pollution. So that's pretty staggering, really, when you think of all the pollution, all the dirt that you see coming out of smokestacks from factories and generators and so on. There is strong evidence that NOx respiratory exposure can trigger and exacerbate existing asthma symptoms. So if you have asthma, it's going to be worse, and may cause development of asthma over longer periods of time. So it may cause reactive airway disease by the continuous inflammation and irritation of breathing NOx. NOx has also been associated with heart disease, diabetes, birth outcomes, all-cause mortality. Living near an interstate has been caused with hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, strokes, early dementia, fetal malformations, autism. Now, when I use the word associated, or when you use the word associated, it's really important that you realize that it's not saying caused. So what I want to point out here is that anytime you see the word associated, I would like for you to consider that there may be health inequities that are operational here, which is kind of at least as big a problem as the cause and effect problems. Can I see the next slide, please? As I said, particulate matter is my favorite. It's composed of chemicals like sulfates, nitrates, carbon, mineral dust. Vehicle and industrial emissions from fossil fuel combustion, cigarette smoke, and burning organic matter, like, home fireplaces, wood stoves, wildfires, all contain particulate matter. I always think about it in terms of the women in Haiti and in India who are cooking over wood burning stoves indoors. And like I raised my kids with a wood burning stove, and it turns out that kids raised in a home that has a wood burning stove, think about all the Navajo kids and the other reservation kids and the Norteños, other people that depend on wood for heat, that they have a much higher incidence of otitis media, middle ear infections, other respiratory problems. So Even in tight stoves, there's leakage. A subset of particulate matter, which is fine particulate matter, that's particulate matter that is smaller than 2.5 microns in diameter, is 30 times thinner than a human hair. So that gives you some idea of how tiny it is. It can be inhaled deeply into lung tissue and contribute to serious health problems. PM 2.5 accounts for most of the health effects due to air pollution in the United States. So if you could only go after one, this would probably be the one. But of course, we're not limited to just one. PM 2.5 passed directly from the bloodstream from the lungs into the bloodstream. And I'll go through that again. I'm going to touch on that again. Excuse me. If you look down at 7 o'clock, you'll see fine beach sand is about 90 microns in diameter. Human hair is 50 to 70 microns in diameter. Look at 3 o'clock, PM 10, which is particulate matter that's between 10 and 2.5 microns in size. Dust, pollen, and mold, etc. And then up at about 1 o'clock, 1:30, PM 2.5, combustion particles, organic compounds, metals, etc. For another reference, a red blood cell, which squeezes pretty easily through capillary tissue, is 7 microns. So these are maybe 1/3 the size of a red blood cell. So that's pretty interesting, pretty significant. Next slide, please. This is a slide. I pulled that last slide off of the EPA. This slide I pulled off of Wikimedia, and it shows relative sizes of some of the things that you're breathing. Looks like none of them are things that you really want to breathe. Notice that it's a logarithmic scale. So if you look at the bottom, the difference between 1 and 10, and the difference between 10 and 100, there's 10 times greater difference between 10 and 100 than there is from 1 to 10. But if they put it on a 1-to-1 scale, it would stretch way out and be really flat. So anyway, you can see for your interest where pollen falls, mold spores, bacteria, cat allergens for the cat people, viruses. Let me digress for a moment. A lot of people have said that masks don't work with COVID because the viruses are smaller than the pores in the masks. And this may be operational with some of the other things we're talking about here. In fact, I'll guarantee you it is. But viruses have an electrostatic charge on them. And the non-woven material in N95 masks, also in surgical masks, but N95 masks are the gold standard. The non-woven material in the N95 masks is also electrostatically charged. So when the viruses pass through the pores, they're snatched to the sides of the pores in the mask, and they stick to the sides of the pores in the mask, and they don't make it into your nose. So that's how they work. So when somebody tells you don't wear a mask, or tells you what kind of mask you can wear, and they're not telling you it's an N95 mask, you can have an educated response. If you look at kind of the yellow at the bottom, soot, tobacco smoke, smog, oil smoke, fly ash, which comes from coal plants, coal power plants, and coal furnaces, and cement dust, all have those relative sizes. PM 2.5 would be, you can't see where I'm pointing to with my pointer, but it'd be about 1/3 of the way across between 0.1 and 1. If you want to make a vertical line to go up to see sort of what else it compares to. May I have the next slide, please? This is a slide that I took from Cleveland Clinic because it shows the terminal airway here in the little circled area. And the terminal airway consists of the bronchiole and then the little grape-like cluster that's hollowed out, that's the alveoli, the alveoli. And the pulmonary arteriole and capillaries. The reason the pulmonary arteriole is in blue is because it doesn't have oxygen in it. It's carbon dioxide rich. the pulmonary vein is the one that carries oxygen back to the heart for circulation around the body. That's kind of important. I wasn't going to mention that, but it's kind of important for what's coming up next. But if you look at how close the pulmonary arterioles and capillaries are in relation to the alveoli, they lie right along them, and they're in close intimate contact. So the oxygen diffuses across from the alveoli into the pulmonary arterioles and capillaries, and the carbon dioxide diffuses back the other way. But when you breathe in PM 2.5 and these other chemicals that we've talked about, they diffuse across right along with the oxygen and get into that little blue network, which, if you could see it, it would be mirrored on the other side as red, going from tiny to larger to much larger. Yeah, as you can see there. So that's how PM 2.5 enters the bloodstream. And I got to say, who would have thought? May I see the next one, please? So particulate matter, particularly PM 2.5, has been classified as a group 1 carcinogen. That means it's not associated with, it's not perhaps, found with, it means it causes cancer. Full stop. It causes cancer. You get exposed to it, your chances of cancer rise. And there's no safe limit to most of these things. It's just a matter of some things being, higher levels being less safe than lower levels, but there's no absolute safety. PM 2.5 directly enter the bloodstream and cause health problems wherever the blood circulates, including the brain, the kidneys, the heart, even the urinary bladder, which is bladder cancer has been shown to be caused in some cases by exposure to diesel smoke. So long haul truckers and folks like that, diesel mechanics. Are you able to hit control and click on that little hyperlink at the bottom?
I guess so.
There you go. Good work. I hope nobody's using their phone to see this, because you're not going to see it. But these are plumes of particulate matter across the globe, and you can fairly clearly see particulate matter pluming across the southwestern United States and kind of up to the Midwest US. The green represents, fortunately, it represents predominantly larger particles, and the red and the yellow represent gradations of smaller particles. You can see that at the bottom. Yeah, the percentage of small particles. So you can see that at the bottom, that you get up into dense red and you've got dense small particles. Anyway, thank you for that. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to give a kind of a visual, so you can see that this affects us here at home. Next slide, please.
Awesome. And just to keep, do you want this slide with the link?
No, that's the same link in case
Oh, okay.
the
Awesome.
first one didn't work. Yeah.
And just to try and keep us with our agenda, like 2 or 3 more minutes, does that sound good for?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
skip this one
Thank
and the
you so
next one.
much. Skip this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so what? Well, this is an article from Journal of the American Medical Association in 2002. And next slide, please. You can read the heading there. The results of the study were that fine particulate and sulfur oxide related pollution were associated with all-cause lung cancer and cardiopulmonary mortality. All-cause means everything that killed somebody, but specifically lung cancer and cardiopulmonary mortality. Cardiopulmonary is like a really big system, so each 10 microgram per cubic meter elevation in fine particulate matter was associated with a 4%, 6%, 8% increase in all-cause cardiopulmonary and lung cancer mortality. What this means is that it's a linear relationship. So it's 1-for-1. The more you have in the air, the more likely you are to die prematurely of something you don't want to die of. May I see the next slide, please? So what's the solution? Public health and toxicology data can provide the foundation for recommendations that are scientifically rigorous, and this information can help guide policy decisions. But in the COVID-19 pandemic, I worked for 2 years as a consultant to Indian Health Service, which was the epicenter of the pandemic for a while. Public health played a major role in public policy decisions regarding masking, distancing, isolation and quarantine, working from home, school from home, and vaccinations. But in the end, public health was joined by other voices, joined by economists, educators, other professionals who all contributed their opinions and their risk benefit equations to inform decisions by political leaders. Social media played a huge role in the information, but of course also in misinformation. So, that's something that we're going to have to be really careful of in the future. And I think that applies to this particular situation as much as it did to COVID. May I see the next slide? So the solutions are political. It's not a public health one. It relies on all the forces of the body politic. Lobbyists and special interest groups have economic and ideological influence on political decisions. The most powerful influence, in my estimation, still remains education with facts, presentation of the facts in a neutral fashion, advocacy, and the vote. So you have information now, and the decision's yours. And I thank you for going overtime with me. I got one more slide for you.
Oh,
One
sorry.
more slide.
I jumped the gun.
Okay.
Here we go.
And what? Oh, those are references. Since I gave you the slides for distro, in case anybody wants to look those up. One more slide yet. Okay. If something's in Latin, it must be true. It says he plants trees to be useful to another generation. This has been paraphrased more recently in the 1950s to say that the civilized person, if you will, is the person who plants trees, even though he knows he will never enjoy the shade or the fruit of those trees. Thank you.
Thank you so much for, this really stunning details and statistics that I know are making me think more about what I want to say when it comes to the November hearings, and what a powerful segue to think about where we speak from and sit as people grounded in traditions of spirit and faith, to name the acting on behalf of future generations. So I'll just say very, very briefly a couple of things, and Lilliana already kind of uplifted how powerful it is in our advocacy to tell our stories and make those as personal to our own experiences and faith traditions as we can. So I'll be sharing Dr. Anderson's slides, and also some more specific guidance from me and Joan and NMIPL about sort of uplifting that kind of statement. And I'll just say that for me, as I'm thinking about preparing for public comment, I certainly want to highlight that, I'm a young adult born and raised in New Mexico, and a faith leader who's soon to be ordained in the United Church of Christ. And in that tradition, we just had a gathering, which we hold every few years, where many delegates come to vote on resolutions of witness. And one of the resolutions passed was a resolution urging for the planning and implementation of electrification. And some of the things uplifted in that resolution are just what Dr. Anderson mentioned about our responsibility to future generations, and a grounding in my faith tradition that we do not own the earth and any part of it, but are stewards who have been gifted care and co-creation of this earth for the benefit of all. And And also, I think the other primary thing that I would uplift from my faith tradition is the calling to care for the most vulnerable. And certainly these presentations have highlighted the necessity of that for the public health standard, or for the public health concerns, for the climate issues that are present in our transportation system. So that's just a little bit about what I'm thinking about. And Joan, do you want to share anything?
No, you did so well, Clara. I just want to emphasize what Clara said. And I think sometimes people of faith or faith and conscience or spiritual paths underestimate the power that perspective carries. And it really is another perspective, and it's quite important because usually the ethical, moral, or the spiritual components are not uplifted to our leaders. And so it's very important to hear that. And right now, faith leaders at the judicatory level, or I'm thinking also of the papal level, the Vatican, are continuing to come out even more strongly about the needs to work on these various tools that we have to address climate, because the most vulnerable, the future generation, and the loss of biodiversity, all of those things. And Pope Francis just came out with another document, an addenda to on care of our common home last week, called Laudate Deum, which he did after the incredibly hot summer heat wave, drought, floods, etc. of the last summer. So I think every tradition has some strong statements, and please draw upon those.
Thank you, Joan. And I know, yeah, we're getting close to our time, and maybe we'll stretch just a few minutes over, but I want to allow some time for questions. And again, we'll share these resources with you as a follow-up.
Does anybody know the status of infrastructure bills that have passed and the impact that may have in the next year in New Mexico in terms of electric vehicles and just the infrastructure, charging stations, et cetera?
That's a good question. Lilliana, do you have any?
I do, yes. I'm very excited to say that the excuse me, infrastructure IIJA, which acronym again, I can never remember what the letters stand for. And then the Inflation Reduction Act both include really big investments in charging infrastructure for states. And so New Mexico is slated to get about 35 billion, I believe, with a B, to install more charging stations all across the state. And so that is one piece of it, though I know that there are other grants available for indigenous communities, tribal communities to apply for as well, so that we can make sure that there's enough charging infrastructure across our very large rural state for people to get to and fro as needed with their EVs.
So related to that question, Lilliana, the faith communities and nonprofits finally are being included in some of the IRA fundings for solar and some other things. But with this infrastructure for charging stations, would those be available to houses of worship who might like to place charging stations in their parking lots? Because many of their parking lots are used by public people, ordinary people during the weekday.
I'm not 100% sure about that. It would make a lot of sense. I know that there are specific grants for nonprofits, which I know many faith-based community centers are nonprofits. And so it is definitely worth looking into, because I know that there is so much money out there, and there's likely a possibility for that.
Right. Maybe we'll put that on our calendar. IPL's doing something specifically on IRA for solar, and also possible grants for energy efficiency in November. That's November 8th, I think. Maybe, Clara, we need to make sure we cover or look at the possibilities for EV charging in parking lots for houses of worship.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. Especially since IPL National has some awards for that, I think, that have just come out. A question in the chat. Thank you. This is important to talk about and will be part of what we follow up with. But we know that there are hour slots on November 13th and 14th, 2-hour-long slots for public comment. So we'll get those specifics out to you. As far as we know, I believe if you're going to give public comment in person, you need to show up and sign up in person. There are also opportunities to give written public comment, and we'll share access to that link. It's important, as we've been discussing in our coalition, that we try and get those written public comments in as early as possible so that they are considered fully for the hearing. So I think ideally those would be in by, I believe that is Monday, November 13th. But we'll follow up with all of those things so you don't have to remember them.
I want to thank Dr. Anderson for clearly helping us to understand that medical issues are really important. We have a lot of investigations, etc. But he clearly said that it's the political will. And I think sometimes that we don't understand, we do not put the political will in ethical dimensions. Because if we keep saying political, what is the political? And it is how we invest ourselves or entangle ourselves into the body politic and who benefits. And I think the question is the common good needs to be very integral when we're talking about politics, and it has to be embedded in ethics.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Thank you, Marlon.
Thanks for that comment. I'd like to suggest, and frankly, it didn't really occur to me to say anything about this until you just spoke. But to go back to the COVID-19 pandemic, if you look at the difference due to politics between the response in Florida and the response in New Mexico, you can see a huge chasm where people are presented with the same, well, sort of the same data, and it's what they choose to believe that makes the difference. So I think it's important to have firm facts. But like in Florida, when the numbers started going up and people started dying like crazy, they stopped publishing the numbers. And that's one way to deal with it, I suppose. But we had a much more enlightened approach in New Mexico, and the Navajos had the highest incidence of deaths by COVID in the nation early in 2020. And we rolled out vaccines and closed off Gallup, so you couldn't get off the interstate in Gallup unless it was just to get gas. Closed off the reservation. They closed off the reservation for the same reasons, and the infection rate plummeted. All of those decisions were based on scientific data, not somebody making up stories. So that's kind of the model that I bring forward to planet warming and then all the multiple factors that go into that. Thank you.
Thank you for equipping us with many very compelling points of data. That's so important. And Mike, thank you for pointing that out too. It is true that these things roll out slowly, which I think adds to the urgency of getting these standards passed as soon as we can. And I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and thank you so much for being here this evening. These are at the state bar. Is that your question of where the hearings are taking place?
Yeah, I think Anne, I think Anne's question, that is a specific hearing that's happened, not hearing, but information session that's happening on Monday. The
Oh,
November meetings will be, I think they're at a different location.
I think they're at the state bar, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, yeah, we'll definitely make sure you are not scrambling for any of those logistics going forward. So I just want to thank everyone again so much for being here. And I thought, as we like to do at NMIPO, we'd end just with a little sort of reflective blessing. I was searching for something around traveling and transportation, because one thing I was reflecting on is that I've been able to borrow my parents' EV sometimes on my commute to work, and I just have a better day when I do that. I think partly because it's lovely and smooth and quiet, but also just because I have like this deep subconscious and conscious knowing that I'm not contributing to CO2 emissions. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the sort of heart and spiritual sort of weight of that. So anyway, I was reflecting on traveling and found and adapted a little bit of a blessing from John O'Donohue. So here it is. Every time you leave home, another road takes you into a world you were never in. New strangers on other paths await. New places that have never seen you will startle a little at your entry. Old places that know you well will pretend nothing changed since your last visit. A journey can become a sacred thing, so make sure before you go to take the time to bless your going forth, that you may discern the urgencies that truly deserve to claim you, and that you may live your time to its fullest, balancing the gift of days which call upon your life. So I thank you for taking the time to honor the calling to be an advocate here tonight.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thanks
so much,
everyone.
Clara, and our speakers, presenters, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.